They made me part of history. A final deleted scene from the cutting room floor. Dear readers, while I'm on vacation, I'm sharing several favorite deleted scenes from my 2021 memoir, The Burning Light of Two Stars. I carefully honed each of these scenes until every word was perfect, tried my best to shoehorn them into my memoir, and held on to them until the bitter end. Ultimately, I had to face the difficult reality that they didn't fit into the arc of my memoir. Beloved as they were, these scenes made the book drag. They had to go. In the show notes, I'll put links to the first two deleted scenes, one about dropping acid with my father and the other about a tragedy I witnessed as a child. But right now I want to share the third scene I chose for this series. Initially, I wrote it to provide context into the era I grew up in and the parents I had. But ultimately, as I cut away all the stories that weren't crucial to my core through line, my lifelong relationship with my mother, our estrangement, and how I came to take care of her at the end of her life, almost all my childhood stories had to go. Ultimately, I cut 30,000 words out of the first completed draft of the book, and the result is a page-turner with real momentum. I couldn't put it down is one of the most frequent comments I get from readers. Ruthless cutting was an essential part of creating a propulsive story. So this is the third scene I cut. I cut more than three, but the three I'm sharing. They made me part of history. When I was in second grade, the Negro cleaning lady came into my all-white classroom at Elbron School while we were in our reading groups and whispered something in my teacher's ear. Mrs. Dennis was my favorite teacher. She taught us to count in Spanish and gave me new books to read every day. But that Friday, her face cracked and she started to cry. She stepped out into the hall and left us alone without a teacher. Nothing like that had ever happened before. A few minutes later, our school principal, who wore a baggy suit and jingled coins in his pocket, got on the intercom and said school was being let out early. He didn't say why. Our parents had been called. They'd be coming to pick us up. Our family lived diagonally across the street from my school. I walked to school, so like every other day, I walked all the way down to the crossing guard at the corner furthest from our house, crossed, then started back on the other side of the street, down the very long block toward home. It was late fall, but there were still lots of leaves on the ground. They were old and brittle and brown. The yellows and oranges and reds were long gone. I crunched those tired old leaves all the way down Park Avenue. Even though I was wearing my wool plaid wraparound skirt, the one with the big gold safety pin that held it together, and my navy blue pea coat with the double-breasted gold buttons, I was still cold. My legs were always cold this time of year. It wasn't fair. Why did only boys get to wear pants to school? I looked both ways at the corner of Park and Van Court before crossing the street, walking up our front steps, turning the crystal doorknob and opening the front door. Mom? Mom? I'm in here. Mom's voice sounded muffled and funny. It was coming from the den, and the TV was on. Why was Mom watching TV in the daytime? She never did that. Mom was sitting on our old brown couch, the one covered with a Mexican serape, with a big silver radiator behind it. On the tile coffee table in front of her was a big ashtray full of butts, and the New York Times, folded back to the crossword puzzle. Every box filled out in ink, not a single cross-out or mistake. Mom did the puzzle every day, always with pen. At least that was normal. Makeup was leaking out of the side of Mom's eyes. Little black hatch marks striped the skin under her lashes. "Oh, Lori," she said. But before I could ask what was happening, Mom shushed me and pointed to the TV, motioning me to sit beside her. I cuddled up next to her. Walter Cronkite was on the TV. That was weird, too. He was usually only on after dinner. Mom put her arm around me. "President Kennedy has been shot." I didn't know what to say. But I thought about Caroline. She was just a little younger than me. And John, he was still a baby. And the First Lady, Jacqueline Kennedy, and her pillbox hat. Mom and Dad had voted for Jack Kennedy. Mom walked the precincts for him. Paul had his campaign button in his campaign button collection. Mom signed people up at the polls for the Democratic Party. We were a Kennedy family. As I pressed my body into Mom's body, we watched what millions of other Americans were watching. This was why school had gotten out early, why Mrs. Dennis had been crying, what the cleaning lady had whispered in her ear. This was why school had stopped, why work had stopped, why everyone had stopped. It was November 22nd, 1963, and all of us, the whole country, watched the world change on TV. Mom and I watched the grainy film of the motorcade over and over. They were talking about something called trajectory and bullets, and the president was in surgery. President Kennedy was having brain surgery. His brains had leaked out all over the First Lady and all over the car. A few minutes later, Walter Cronkite came back on TV and told us the president was dead. That night, as we sopped up gravy from my favorite dinner, hot dog and bean casserole made of cut-up hot dogs, Heinz vegetarian baked beans, molasses, watered-down ketchup, and a dab of spicy Gulden's mustard, we had a family meeting. Mom and Dad told us we were going to President Kennedy's funeral in Washington, D.C. I don't remember if we drove or took the bus into Grand Central Station to catch the train from New York, but we were there. We went for 2 nights and stayed in a cheap hotel. Mom wrote a note excusing me from Sunday school so I could go to President Kennedy's funeral. I saved that note for years. I'd hoped to find it, but it never turned up. I'd always been proud of that note. Proud I'd been there. Proud we'd all been there. Our whole family. Dad carried me on his shoulders all night so I could see the casket in the rotunda with the flag draped over the top. It wasn't the first time my parents helped me be part of history. 3 months earlier, they'd taken us to D.C. for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Buses drove in from all over the country, and we were on one of them, singing freedom songs with teachers and factory workers, housewives and seamstresses, students and file clerks, all committed to fighting segregation. If I had a hammer, I'd hammer in the morning, I'd hammer in the evening, all over this land. I'd hammer out danger, I'd hammer out warning, I'd hammer out the love between my brothers and my sisters, all over this land. When we stepped off the bus in Washington, it was a hot, sticky day. We waded into a sea of people. That's what Mom called it, a sea of people. Hundreds of thousands, she said. I held Mom's hand. I'd never seen so many people in my life. People with skin of every shade, young people, old people, kids like me. People up in trees and perched on fences. Men and women carrying black and white signs. We demand decent housing now. We demand equal rights now. There is no halfway house on the road to freedom. All around us, people were singing that day's special songs, their voices rising up together. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. Mom had packed a picnic, and we wandered through the crowds until we found a good spot, right at the edge of the reflecting pool. I took off my keds and tucked my white anklets inside. As I ate my Oreos, first the top, then the cream, then the bottom, and licked the edge of my peanut butter and jelly sandwich, we listened to Mahalia Jackson and Harry Belafonte and Joan Baez. Odetta sang, "Oh, Freedom." Then they introduced a new singer, Bobby Dylan. Mrs. Medgar Evers gave a speech. I don't remember it, but Dad told me her family had been murdered by people who didn't believe in civil rights, and that's why we were there. By the end of the steamy Washington afternoon, I was tired and hot, but we stayed until the very end. I dangled my feet in the water as Martin Luther King's voice rang out, "I have a dream." I was 8 years old, my feet gently kicking the cool water. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. When Dr. King finished speaking, the long day was finally over. I don't know how we found our way back to the bus, but Dad carried me. I fell asleep in Mom's arms to the sound of freedom songs in 4-part harmony. I don't recall now if August 28, 1963 was a 1 ice cream day, but it was so hot it might have been a 2 ice cream day. But I didn't need an extra ice cream to know the day was special. I could already tell. So that's the third of the 3 deleted scenes that I've shared for the last few weeks here. And if you would like to read the book that they got cut out from, that is my 2021 award-winning memoir, The Burning Light of 2 Stars. And here's a little bit of what has been said about the book. This is from the Los Angeles Review of Books. In her willingness to dive deeply into the murky territory of a mother and daughter who have been estranged for years, Davis manages to compress a lifetime's worth of charged memories, almost forgotten documents, and bittersweet efforts to reconcile. The result is a richly woven narrative that goes far beyond personal revelation, offering inspiration to others who are struggling with the supremely complicated landscape of caregiving for parents near the end of life. This is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a feel-good saga. It is a beautifully written story of excruciating betrayals and enduring damage, alongside hard-won compassion and nuanced acceptance. And this from Abby Stavelman-Hockey, Executive Director, Interfaith Philadelphia. I finished The Burning Light of 2 Stars in a bed of tears. What an eloquent, compelling story. And this from Kay Taylor, author of Soul Pathway. I quickly ran out of superlatives for The Burning Light of 2 Stars because so many scenes grabbed me. From the first page, I was fully engaged in Laura's world and didn't want to put the book down. It was as if she was speaking my story, her mother a mirror of my own. I am certain this wise exploration of mother-daughter dynamics over a lifetime will resonate broadly. As I pored over its pages, I didn't want this beautiful, compelling story to end. And for me, it hasn't. Laura's memoir and all her characters have stayed with me to this day. And this from Tony Teller, a retired nurse. I have never experienced a book like this before. I was fully engrossed in every scene as if I was living it. I just couldn't put it down. I can't find words for how powerfully the burning light of stars affected me. I'm a different person after having read it. My heart is full. Laura Davis addresses the complexity of family relationships like nothing I've ever read before. And finally, this from Nancy J. Schwartz. This is a book about real human conditions and connections, not at all about politics. Yet for me, as I finished the book, my thoughts went to the broken connections so many in our country are living with. So much anger and polarization, such profound and intractable disagreements that have led to estrangements even from family and previously dear friends. Perhaps this book can teach us about holding on to our precious and deep human connections in spite of irreconcilable disagreements, and give us hope that it might be possible if we are willing and determined to work toward that end. Thanks for being with me this week. There'll be links to the 3 deleted scenes in the show notes, and I look forward to coming back next week for another episode of The Writer's Journey.